The summary task is going to be the final task that you do in the speaking section. And I like to call it the paradoxical task because in many ways it's the easiest, but in many ways it's the most difficult. So you have to be very careful. Okay, so as with all of the speaking items, the sequence is going to save you, and we'll just go through this quickly so you know what it is. Again, it's like the previous item. Is there a reading? No, there's no reading on this item. There is a listening. It's a lecture in this case, not a conversation. And the question, then again, 30 seconds of prep? No, you're going to have 20 seconds of preparation. Then the final thing that you have to do is speak. Once again, for 60 seconds. All integrated items are 60 seconds. Okay, the important phase of this item is the listening, because you have to intake all of this information. But there's a problem. There's always too much information. Every single time you're going to have too much information. So your job, so the reason, that's why it's called the paradoxical task, because you will always have too much information and you'll never be able to tell me all of the details in your response. So what your job is to identify the main sections, because this is always put into different sections, and then try to, probably in the preparation phase, identify what is an important point, what is a useful detail, and what is a detail that you can ignore. Okay, so let's take a look at an example. This one's going to be about avalanches. You'll hear a lecture. Obviously, this is written down. It'll be something like this. Avalanches are a common phenomenon in high alpine areas. They cause death and destruction and can be naturally occurring or man-made. Avalanches are quickly moving flows of snow, and the most common types are slab avalanches and powder snow avalanches. Okay, so this part you're going to want to decide which is the important part of the information you do not need. Okay, we know that the sections are going to follow what they tell us in the introduction. So for sure, the first section will be slab avalanche. They account for 90% of the deaths involving, avalanches. Most commonly occur in snow that has been deposited by wind, not by snowstorms, and they often have fractures at the top sides, bottom of the slab. Then we know that there's going to be some form of powder snow avalanche, whatever that is. So we have dry snow avalanche. They're the biggest avalanche. They can travel at 300 kph with 10 million tons of mass sometimes. They normally appear in dry powder and move long distances. Okay, and then the final one, wet snow avalanche. This is actually another type of powder snow avalanche. So the second and the third example are two types of a similar avalanche. So they are low velocity suspension of snow and moisture, and they move slowly and are near the surface, but they have a big mass and can cause serious destruction. They commonly happen at the end of winter and usually when the temperature is warm. Okay, so this is way too much information to explain in 1 minute, so you have to select what you're going to say. The first thing you need to do in the preparation phase is identify important pieces of information. Here, the definition of avalanches is very important. Here, the definition of a slab avalanche and kind of one basic idea of what it is very important. Here, this type of powder snow avalanche and its importance is important. And also, this other type of powder snow avalanche is important. But you're not going to be able to get all of the details. So here, this context part, it's really interesting, but we probably don't have time to explain it. Here, this is some kind of physical characteristics of this avalanche. We probably don't have time to explain it. Here, the fact that it goes uphill, we really don't have time to explain it. And finally, in this part, there's a lot of information about these wet, slow avalanches that we just cannot fit into our response. So we just need to focus on the most important aspect of them, which is that they're low velocity and they include moisture. So when we're speaking, we have to remember to mention all of the sections, but not all the details. So we're going to have to say something about each one of these yellow boxes, but not everything because we do not have time. So this item is all about choosing and prioritizing your information. So here's what a response might look like. And you don't need to worry about complicated linking language so much. Just make sure you get the content out. Focus on the content and mention all 4 of the sections. In this case, we have 4 sections. Sometimes you have 5, sometimes you have 3. 4 is pretty common. Okay, so it's going to be something like this. An avalanche is defined as rapidly moving snow. The professor describes 3 common types. The first type is the slab avalanche. It usually happens in snow deposited by wind. The second type, dry snow avalanches, are the fastest and may involve 10 million tons of snow. They occur in dry powder. And finally, wet snow avalanches are a mix of snow and water. They generally move slowly but can still cause serious damage. So here, I did not mention the fact that dry snow avalanches and wet snow avalanches are both types of powder snow avalanches. I did that to save a little bit of time. The one change that I would make if I felt like I had more time would be to specify that the second type and the third type were types of the same avalanche. So here we go. This is from the introduction. I basically just give the definition. Here I explain the first type with one detail, basically. Here I explain the second type with one detail again, and finally the third type with one detail. I know that I don't have time to give much more information than that. All right, finally, here's what the chuleta, if you're a Spanish speaker, looks like, and the cheat sheet if you're not a Spanish speaker. This one is a little bit more conceptual because you don't have to be analyzing so much the information in a way other than just remembering to mention each section. Each one of these boxes correlates to a section, and so you might have the intro, point 1 and point 2, and it finishes, or you have intro, point 1, point 2, point 3, and it finishes, or you have intro, point 1, point 2, point 3, conclusion, and it finishes, or any combination. So these 2 green lines indicate that the third point is optional and the conclusion is optional. You just have to try to identify the sections as you listen, and then in the 20 seconds of preparation, identify the sections and the important pieces of information for each one. Okay, that's the end of the speaking section. Congratulations.